For centuries, European nations were locked in this incredible race, a race eastward. And the prize? Well, it was control over the incredibly rich trade routes to India. This wasn't just about getting spices, it was a competition that would literally reshape the world. So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth does a simple desire for pepper and cinnamon turn into the full-blown conquest of a massive subcontinent? It seems like a huge leap. And the answer? Well, it's this crazy mix of new ship technology, shifting politics, and really the birth of a whole new global power game. Think about this for a second. An empire collapses. The Pope draws a line on a map, literally dividing the non-Christian world in two, and a single ship sails off into the complete unknown. Now, this isn't some fantasy novel. These were the actual events that kicked off one of the most high-stakes races in all of history. Okay, so let's get to the why. Why India? Why was everyone so obsessed? For ages, Europe had this insatiable appetite for Eastern spices. The problem was getting them involved a long, complicated overland journey with tons of middlemen. Each one took a cut, so by the time a single peppercorn reached Europe, it was astronomically expensive. Finding a direct sea route, that wasn't just a shortcut. It was the key to unlocking unimaginable wealth. And really, it was a perfect storm of events that lit the fuse. First, in 1453, Constantinople falls. Boom. The mainland route to the east is shut down. Suddenly, everyone has to find a way by sea. Then you have the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, where the Pope basically gives Portugal the green light for the eastern seas. And sure enough, just 4 years later, Vasco da Gama makes it. The race was officially on. And getting there first, that was a huge deal for Portugal. It gave them an incredible head start. For almost 100 years, they basically had the entire Indian Ocean to themselves, and you better believe they made the most of it. So what was their game plan? It was something they called the Blue Water Policy, and it was brilliant in a pretty brutal way. The idea wasn't to conquer land, at least not at first. It was to own the sea. They did this with a system called the Cartas. Basically, if you wanted to sail and trade in the Indian Ocean, you had to buy a license from them. And if you didn't have one, well, your ship and everything on it was considered fair game. It was a massive protection racket enforced with cannons. The guy who really perfected this system was Alfonso de Albuquerque. He took it to the next level. He wasn't just content with controlling the water, he wanted land. In 1510, he captures Goa, and this is a huge moment. It's the very first piece of Indian territory to be directly ruled by a European power. He made the permit system even stricter, seized control of shipbuilding, and pushed for Portuguese to settle there, building a real, lasting presence. He even got involved in local social customs, like abolishing the practice of sati. But you know how it goes. A monopoly like that could never last. The money was just too good. All the other major players in Europe looked at Portugal and thought, we want in on that. And just like that, the race was about to get way more crowded and a whole lot messier. And take a look at this. The 1600s were just an explosion of new competition. Portugal's exclusive party, totally over. Suddenly you have the English, the Dutch, the Danes, the French. They all form their own powerful East India companies, and they start grabbing their own little pieces of the Indian coast. The Indian Ocean went from being Portugal's private lake to an all-out battleground. All right, so now the field is crowded with heavy hitters, which leads to the next big question. How did one of them, the English, manage to come out on top? I mean, not just beat the others, but eventually take over the whole subcontinent. It all boiled down to a handful of really key advantages. One of the biggest differences was just how they were organized. The English East India Company, it was a private business run by a board of directors owned by shareholders. Their one and only goal was to make money. That made them fast, flexible, and super efficient. Now, you look at their rivals, like the French and Portuguese. Their companies were mostly state-owned. That meant tons of bureaucracy, red tape, and they were always getting tangled up in politics back home. They just couldn't move as quickly. But it wasn't just about being a lean, mean private company. The English had a whole slate of other advantages. For starters, their military was top-notch, a better navy, and a really disciplined army. Then there's the money. The Industrial Revolution was just getting started, pumping huge amounts of cash into their economy, and they got really good at borrowing money to pay for their wars. On top of all that, their government was more stable, and they were a bit more religiously tolerant, which actually helped them make better deals with local Indian rulers. When you boil it all down, though, this race was won on the water, and the British Royal Navy was without a doubt the biggest and baddest naval force in the world. They could protect their own trading ships while at the same time hunting down and sinking their competitors. In a global competition built on sea lanes, having the best navy was the ultimate trump card. So, with everyone else basically knocked out of the ring, the English East India Company was no longer just some trading business. It had become the dominant power in the region. And its victory, well, it was a massive, history-changing turning point for India. This quote here really says it all. What started as a commercial venture, a race for spices and cloth, ended up building the foundation for something completely different. It created a whole new political reality, one where a private company was literally paving the way for the British Empire to take over. Which leaves us with one last pretty chilling thought. The race for trade was over and the English had won. But as the East India Company got more and more powerful, the game started to change. It wasn't about markets anymore. It was becoming a race for territory, a full-blown conquest for land. And that, well, that's a story for another time.